Hello, today is December 16th and welcome to part 2 of my definitely insane attempt to try and finish my Aziraphale cosplay by January 1st. So if you haven't seen part 1 of this video series, in November I decided to challenge myself to finish my Aziraphale cosplay from Good Omens by the end of the year. I had already bought all of the materials and accessories, and in November and the first part of December, I made the pants and styled the wig, which means that now I just need to make the vest and modify the coat. Of course, at this point, there are only about 2 weeks left of the year, and I am not feeling very confident in my ability to do all the things I need to do by my loose deadline of January 1st. Like I said, it's a loose deadline. I was never going to pressure myself to finish this by January 1st. It was just a goal. And if I don't get it done by then, which seems very likely, I am perfectly fine with that, and I will be aiming for finishing it by the end of January. Either way, I have lots of stuff to do and only a couple weeks to do it in, so let's get started. So the next thing I'm going to work on is the vest. So the pattern I'm going to be working with is this one, Simplicity 2895. I got this pattern several years ago when making the coat for someone, and so therefore it is not quite my size. However, since this is just a vest, and I am planning on using this vest pattern for several different cosplays at this point, it's going to be fairly easy, I believe, to make a mock-up and size it down. So making that mock-up is going to be the first thing I do. Alright, I've laid out all of the pattern pieces in their spots so I can get an idea of what it's supposed to be like and get an idea of some changes I want to make. So first of all, I am not doing this tiny pocket because it is tiny and stupid and pointless, and also not accurate to literally any of the vests that I'm going to be making with this pattern. So that's going back in the envelope right away. Second, I'm going to not do this dart because, again, it's not very accurate to any of the vests, and also I don't think that my faux velvet for my Aziraphale vest will press very well into a dart. And lastly, I really do not want to try and make a welt pocket through a dart because I feel like that would just be a pain. Also, I will be lowering the neckline swoop bit quite a bit for Aziraphale, as his vest has a much lower neckline than this pattern does. We'll be using the shawl collar, but I think I'm going to be slimming that down a bit because his is not quite this wide. And lastly, on the immediately obvious changes, for some reason, they want me to make the back out of the main fabric rather than the contrasting lining, which is not how I have ever seen any vest of this style done. Literally every single dress vest, like waistcoat style vest, has the contrasting lining fabric for the back. So we're just gonna have to hope that I got enough of the lining to do this in the way that it should be instead of this weird way. Alright, full disclosure, I ended up taking the rest of December off, only somewhat on purpose, and it is now January 5th, so we're going to actually make this mock-up now. Okay, I have put together the mock-up. As you can see, it is very much too large by a lot. So Now the next step is going to be taking it in. Alright, so I turned it inside out so I can access all of the seams, and I tried it on myself to double check fit stuff. And so on the back there is a center back seam, and I was fully anticipating needing to make the back less broad, but apparently I don't need to do that, especially with the way that the neck is up here. Like, that would be way too small if I did that. So the back is going to be staying as is, which means that for now we are just starting with the side seams. This dress form is technically my measurements, but it still is sometimes a little tricky to tell how well something fits on it as opposed to me. So we're going to go conservative for the first taking in. So we'll just take in a small amount on each side, do another test fit, and keep going until we have the size that it needs to be. Alright, using the highly technical measurement method of lining up the edge of the fabric with this little arrow that's on the plate on my sewing machine surface, I have brought in the sides a little bit. I'd say it's probably like ½ inch. It fits a bit better. I am not 100% certain. When I tried it on, there was some weird like bubbling stuff happening in the back of the armhole, so that's going to take some figuring out. I may need to perhaps take in the shoulder seams a little. This is where we get to the part where I am not a tailor at all, and so I don't know always the best places to, you know, take things in. So it's a little hard when I'm just wearing a t-shirt and not wearing the full stuff I'm going to be wearing underneath. So don't 100% know about the fit yet, but I just know that I do need to fix whatever weird bubbling stuff is happening back here. Okay, I put it on again, went in front of a mirror, did some attempts at figuring things out, and what I think might need to happen is that it needs to come in more up here than it does down here. So like bring it in the armpit area and then just sort of taper down perhaps. Okay, today is January 26th, but I actually have a good excuse this time for my hiatus, and that is I got my booster and had all the side effects for like a week. So I was too sick to work on anything. But we are able to get back to things now. I obviously am pushing my deadline back to the end of February instead of the end of January, because obviously I'm not going to be able to finish all this in 5 days. But anyway, let's get back to work. So before my unintentional hiatus, I did a little fitting with my mom so I could get it pinned in places that I couldn't reach myself. And now we're going to actually sew those down. So the first of the modifications that we pinned is on the side seams here, taking it in at a diagonal because I am not a square and therefore have some curves that must be accommodated. I'm going to be taking in that same amount on both sides. And then the second one, ignore that mess over there, is the back. I'm taking in a curved part here on the back, staying the same up at the top and a little bit at the bottom. But again, I am not a square, so there are curves that must be accommodated so as to get this a bit more tight-fitting than it would have been otherwise. Once I finished sewing down all of those changes, I marked how low I wanted the neckline to go, and then I was able to transfer my patterns onto paper. Alright, I have put together the inner lining and have pinned the sides where they're supposed to be because of the way the pattern wants me to do this, to test everything fit-wise, make sure that my pattern did in fact work, and it did. So we can move along with this now, but the only trouble is that the back somehow ended up longer than the front, so I'm going to trim that on this and then shorten the pattern piece. I think I just added seam allowance to my pattern piece that I didn't need to. Okay, I've cut out the second back and finished it up, so I have finished prepping all of the lining parts. However, I am slightly concerned about the floppiness of this lining fabric, even when it's doubled like it will be on the back of the vest, especially in comparison to the sturdiness of my main fabric. And I'm a little worried the back will not have the greatest like structural integrity. Like obviously it'll still hold its shape and everything, but I mean like it'll just be very floppy in the back and then more structured in the front. So I'm considering doing on this outer back piece some sort of stabilizing thing, either interfacing or flatlining it with a slightly stiffer fabric. Gonna have to think on that. In the meantime, time to lay out and cut out my other fabric. Once I finished cutting out the fabric, the first thing I started putting together was the back belt pieces. I was definitely jumping around a bit in the instructions. Next, I did the interfacing for the various pieces that needed to be interfaced, so the collar and the welts for the pockets. And then I put together the collar. Again, I was jumping around in the order of things, and after I finished making the collar, I actually attached the belt pieces to the back of the vest, as well as attaching the buckle. Next, I did the front facing and attached that to the lining. Basically, it's just an extra layer in the area where the buttons and buttonholes go. Alright, at this point, I had no other choice but to do the welt pockets, but I spent quite a while putting that off and not sure how to do it, and then I had to put the whole project on hold to finish projects for Emerald City, and long story short, several months passed and it was August when I finally got around to making and attaching the welt pockets. Honestly, when I finally figured out how to do it, making the pockets was not too terrible. I found a really good tutorial on YouTube that I will link for others because I do not feel confident in teaching how to do that through this video. So you can find that in the description if you are also unsure how to make welt pockets. Once I finished with the pockets, I could finally attach the collar to the front parts. And once the collar was attached, it was time to, at last, make this thing actually look like a vest. Next was attaching the lining. I sewed it down on all edges except for the side seams so that I could then turn it right side out and then close up the side seams after that. Alright, so I didn't film any of the button and buttonhole sewing, which ended up being a good thing because things ended up getting a little weird and experimental. So, because of the thickness of the velvet, when I went to do the buttonholes, things didn't go quite as planned and they weren't the right size and I couldn't open them all up all the way. So what I ended up doing is having snaps, and the buttons are just decorative. Of course, because of that, there were no buttonholes for me to loop the watch fob doodad into to have it dangle, so I have these large jump rings that I got for my Yasha cosplay, and I just put one around this button here so I can hook that on there and have it dangle. But yes, I have finally, many months later, finished the vest. I've decided that since it took me so long and I, need videos to post, that I'm just going to post this half of the video now, and then I have to put this project on pause again because I need to make my Kaz vest before October. So I am going to, once I finish that, then I will do the coat modification. So yeah, I promise that part 3 of this video, which was supposed to be a 2-part video, will not be quite as long in the making as this was. And yeah, thank you for watching and for your patience, and I will see you next time.